Welcome, writers, readers, and friends to the Authors Talking Bookish podcast. I'm Donna Norman Carbone, author of All That Is Sacred.
And I'm Hope Gibbs, author of Where the Grass Grows Blue.
We're two debut writers traditionally published by a small publishing house, bringing to you all the experiences that we as authors learn the hard way, so you don't have to.
We'll give you insights from the inception of a book idea to publication and beyond. And along the way, we'll share our love of books from the writer's perspective.
Welcome back, friends. It is episode 51, and today we are addressing editing. It's called Editing Uncovered, What Writers Need to Know. I'm Donna Carbone, and I am joined by Hope Gibbs.
Hey, Donna. And I have to say this, somebody celebrated a pretty big birthday a couple of weeks ago or a couple of days ago. Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a big one.
You had a fun party. You had a theme party, which I think is amazing.
I did. We had a shot party. So everybody who came to the party needed to bring shots, whether it was a beverage, an appetizer, a dessert. And we had a blast. It was a beautiful day. We went in the pool. We had lots of laughs.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Well, I want to get started because this, to me, is one of the most important parts of writing, and it's editing. And when I went through my first edits, I was quite naive about the process. I thought you sent it off and it came back beautiful. It was all fixed. And little did I know that's where the real hard work starts. So we have two fantastic guests coming up. And so I'm just going to bring them on in. Hello, John. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good.
Excellent. We're going to get started with your bios, and I'm going to start with Sarah. Sarah Rexford is an SEO copywriter for clients internationally, including those recognized by Forbes, the New York Times, and the United Nations. She edits for a publisher in Manhattan, with her most notable title ranking as a #1 new release in sports psychology. Sarah runs a website for writers that brings in roughly 100,000 impressions. She coaches writers, and she has spoken at writing conferences. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you. And then let's get to John. So John DeDakis is a freelance editor and author and is a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. He is the author of 6 novels, and his most recent novel is Enemies Domestic, which won a Pencraft and a Feather Quill Book Award. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
He is also a former White House correspondent and is also a writing coach, manuscript editor, and a podcaster. So we are in for a treat because, again, editing, as I said at the top of the show, is essential for any book to come to life. So we just want to pick your brains, and you could give our listeners some real insights into how you do this, the process. So let's start.
So I just want to know from each of you, what got you into editing?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I started training with a New York Times bestseller in probably 2016, and it just taught me a love for the craft and the writing rules. And I was an aspiring author at the time, but from there transitioned into editing manuscripts. And I treat editing like a puzzle. I just love all those words, those little puzzle pieces that you have to fit just perfectly. Of course, you have to abide by all the style guides and formatting, all of that, but just playing with words is just a joy to me. I really love it.
That's actually the term that I use when I'm in the editing stage is I'm puzzling.
That's great.
John, what about you?
I fell into it by default. I was a reporter, and then I was a writer at CNN, and they made me an editor without any training. They just threw me in the deep end, and it was tedious. It was fault finding. And so I needed a creative outlet. So I wrote a novel, as if it's that easy. It took 10 years to get the agent that I've got. It went through 14 major revisions. She's the 39th agent that I queried. But once I got published, I would go to writers' conferences, and I can remember this time a guy handed me his 150,000 word tome and said, and this is a quote, "Give it a quick read and tell me what you think." And there is no such thing, at least with me, as a quick read, and it needs work isn't really that helpful. So I monetized it. And so now I edit people's manuscripts. I'm a one-on-one writing coach, and I teach people how to write novels.
So, John, I'm curious, how is it being a writer? How do you come about being an editor from a writer's brain and vice versa? So, what benefits, what kind of challenges does that raise?
I think that the way I approach it is sort of the left brain, right brain imbalance. You start with the blank page, and I've discovered that I can only plan effectively so much. And then I don't plan nearly as clearly and as thoroughly as I would like. And so about halfway through the project, I have to just start getting the characters talking to each other. And I've discovered that writing is like dipping a straw into your subconscious. And you start to ask those what if questions, and it comes streaming through your fingers and onto the page. That's the right brain approach. Then once it's this steaming pile of clay, you go back and put your left brain to work to make it coherent. And both sides are fun. I like the editing side because by that time you've at least got something to work with more than a blank page.
That's interesting. Sarah, what are some tools that you use in your process of editing?
I'm a minimalist when it comes to tools. I'm a Microsoft Word lover through and through. A lot of that is just depending on the publishing house you're working with, what their standards are, what they accept. But really, track changes is my right-hand man. I'm always using track changes, using comment boxes to kind of explain my edits to authors so they at least have context and don't just get a bunch of red back on their manuscript. But yeah, track changes, Chicago Manual of Style, whatever style guide the publisher uses. Those are my go-tos, and it helps just to keep it minimal for me. I'm always open to using new tools, and I like kind of dipping my toe in. But for the publisher I work with, Chicago Manual Style, Microsoft Word, clean format, and it works well.
Cool.
So this is a question for both of you, because as someone who went through the editing process, it was really hard the first time I got back feedback and those edits. And I think a lot of writers have that because this book, most people are with this book for, at least 6 months to a year to sometimes 2 or 3 years. What advice do you give writers out there when they get those edits about not taking it personally? And what advice do you have? How do they take that? Because again, it's a personal, it almost feels like it's your child.
Right.
Let's start with Sarah. What would you say to writers about this?
It helps to know, for one, that you have an editor who's a good fit for you. The fit really matters, especially pertaining to author voice and tone. An editor that will see your voice and draw it out and not try to change it. But then telling authors that the editor really is for you. The changes are to enhance your manuscript, not to destroy it, not to make it something entirely different unless that's necessary, which it rarely is. But it helps once they receive, a document full of red to just kind of give it a day or two and calm down a moment, realize they're for you, and then just comb through the edits and realize that the author has the final say because they're the creative in the process. The editor is just a guide helping them along. And so that's one reason why I leave comment boxes, is to say, here's the context for why. And unless it's like a formatting issue or a style guide issue, like, you have the final say. You get to decide. This is your baby. I'm just here to guide you through the process.
I would second that. There's not too much I can add to it. It's editing and reading. Those are subjective things. I mean, obviously things have to be spelled a certain way, but a lot of what Sarah and I do is we look at the story. And so, the way I tell my clients is, you're not paying me to be nice, you're paying me to be honest. And, I try to be, have some humor and all of that. But in the end, and I'm able to encourage. I think that, if there's some things that I think are really good, I definitely want to say that, because I think we all need to be affirmed. But then I temper that with the honest, this isn't ready for prime time yet. Here's why. And I think, just to build on what Sarah said again, is that, when you get rejected by an agent, usually they don't tell you why. It's like, not a good fit or good luck with your writing. And that's not helpful. And so what we're able to do is, as she said, give you the reasoning, the context, the perspective that you don't otherwise get.
Yeah.
Sarah, you mentioned finding an editor who's a good fit for you, and this question is for either of you. How would you recommend a writer find an editor that is a good fit? What's something that they can do to determine that?
One of the things I think maybe just to schedule a 10-minute Zoom call to get a face-to-face, see how the vibe is, and ask them questions about how do you approach it. Maybe do an edit of the first 5 pages or something, or the first page, so that you get a sense of how the person operates. That's my 2 cents.
I would second that, John. I think I found, at least in my life as a writer, it's helpful for me to find published authors who have a career as an author and I really like their work. And a lot of times they offer some like side coaching, some side editing, to reach out to them and say, hey, I love the tone of your work. I love, say your genre is the same as mine. Would you be willing to walk me through some developmental edits or some coaching, some line editing? And just like teach me how you edit your work so I can apply that to my own. I love what John said about kind of the sample edit. I like to do that for authors before we sign the contract, to say, hey, this is the style that I'll be taking. Say you want to copy edit, this is what it will look like. Here's a page to kind of demonstrate. And if you love that, great, let's sign the contract and continue. If it's not what you're expecting, that's totally fine. And I can refer you to somebody else.
Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome.
So let's talk about pet peeves. What are some of your pet peeves when you see in a manuscript that automatically just is a turnoff, and you hope that writers try to not use those in their work?
How much time do we have?
We've got plenty of time, but honestly, because a lot of writers don't realize that they're doing something wrong. What's something you tell every writer, stop, don't do it?
I have 3 quick ones. Too much backstory at the very beginning, too many semicolons, and paragraphs that are too long.
Okay.
Those are great. I wouldn't say I have pet peeves necessarily, but you can tell if an author is newer, and we all start somewhere. I once received a manuscript for a novel, and it was pretty much one continuous paragraph from first page to last. And so the more that I edited, the longer it became. But that's just, everybody has to learn, and that's okay. I think the biggest thing I see is passive voice. And so just editing that out and teaching writers.
Define passive voice. What does that mean?
For me, it's a lot of the protagonist is being acted upon. They're not proactive. They're not taking charge. A lot of state of being verbs, and just it makes the reader less engaged.
I love that. And thank you for that follow-up question, because a lot of people may not know that term. So I appreciate that. Is there a POV that you prefer? Do you prefer first person, third person, omniscient, or it doesn't matter? It's just about the story.
It's about the story. It's what works.
What about genre preferences? Do either of you have genre preferences?
No.
I do fiction and nonfiction. In nonfiction, I love business, psychology, all of that. And in fiction, just whatever genre, as long as the character is well-rounded, or we can work together to make that character well-rounded. I love character-driven stories.
Yeah. At what point do you think a writer should seek an editor's help? At what point in their process?
My suggestion is that they should get beta readers first. People with whom you don't share a bed or a last name, because those people will either break your spirit or be so complimentary they won't be helpful at all. People who will tell you what's wrong or what's not working. You don't have to pay these people anything, and their feedback is invaluable. You really need an editor. You need a developmental editor to get a sense of the story and the characters. You need a deep dive copy editor when you want to make sure it's pristine and ready for prime time to send to an agent.
I love
As-
that. I would definitely start with beta readers, and developmental editors as soon as possible is my recommendation, even if an author only has a synopsis to say,
Mhm.
hey, can you take a peek at this? Tell me if the pacing feels right, if my character feels likable. Because if you write 80, 100,000 words and your character isn't likable, that's just going to set you back. So if you can have a professional set of eyes early, the earlier the better.
I like that because I think a
Yeah.
lot of writers, especially new writers, think I have to have a complete story before I even go to a developmental edit. And that can save you a lot of time if you are not on the right track versus, 10,000 words versus 90,000 words.
But I think that there is one problem with that, and that is some people are not planners, they're pantsers. They just let it rip and see what shows up. And so for someone who hasn't written anything yet, to plan it out might be too daunting, and they just need to just let the characters start talking and see what happens. So there are really two approaches. I
Yeah.
agree with Sarah, though, that if you can plan it out, that would be the ideal, because an agent cares about that. They want to know if you know how to tell a story. And this is a way for you to tell yourself if you're telling a story clearly.
Yeah, I always say that first draft is the story you tell yourself.
You're right.
Yeah. Maybe we could back up just a little bit because you both mentioned developmental editing and line editing. For any of our listeners who don't know the distinction between the two, can each of you describe, what they are?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, so I mean, there's always nuance from editor to editor, but overall, developmental is in the word itself. You're looking at the development of the story. How does it progress? How does the scenes progress? The characters for nonfiction. Is your theme coming out strongly? Are you building up? Are you coming down appropriately? And then line editing is really just like that word by word. And that's one of my favorites, where you're looking at the nuance of the sentences, how they flow. Are they long? Are they short? How can you vary that? Those puzzle pieces we talked about earlier, and how can we make it really sing?
What she said.
Okay.
So I have a question. So if you have someone out there who is in the middle of writing their book, or they're starting out, are there a few books that you recommend? Hey, this is a great tool for you. Someone suggested to me the Emotional Thesaurus years ago, and I live by that book. It helped me with POV and dialogue. What are 2 or 3 books that you suggest any new writer have on their desktop or in their chair or on the beach, wherever they're writing?
The one book I recommend all the time is a book that I used as a template for the first 2 books that I wrote, and that's The Weekend Novelist by Robert Ray. I think it's published by Writer's Digest, and I mean, it's been in print since like the mid 90s, and it's dirt cheap on Amazon. And basically, the premise is, if you've only got a limited amount of time, like a weekend, he's very specific on how to craft a novel and write it in 9 months. And he discusses the marketing approach as well. So that was a very helpful book for me, and I recommend it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Sarah?
great. Yeah, I would say, I mean, authors who I think write great books on writing craft would be Stephen James and Diane Mills. But I love really any books that kind of discuss psychology. I find those have been particularly helpful, or even nonverbal communication for fiction, particularly because you can read books on the craft all day long, but at some point it does help to take at least a little bit of a dip into the psychology of characters and nonverbal communication.
Oh man, you just hit on something really important. I think the better you know yourself as a person, the better your writing will be. And then you'll be baking authenticity into your characters. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, Lisa Crone is an author who deals with the psychology of characters, just for anyone out there. But yeah, that's a really good suggestion. Um, can you just describe what the difference is for our audience from editing versus writing coaching? Like, when would they seek a writing coach versus an editor?
Well, let's see. I do some writing coaching, and I approach it basically, I'm here on an as needed basis. You tell me what you feel you need. And I'm finding that a lot of times it's not necessarily the nuts and bolts. I'm doing a lot of hand holding, a lot of cheerleading. And so I think that because you can be your worst critic. And I think that the biggest danger has nothing to do with how well you write. It's that you feel you aren't any good and you take yourself out of the process before anybody else even has a chance to see it. And I think that's a shame. And that's one of the things I do is try to encourage people.
It's so well said, John. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say exactly what he said. I think coaches are a big part of that work, is just encouraging somebody. I think it can speed up the publishing process. There's so much information online and in books where you can kind of figure out how to publish not on your own, unless you want to self-publish, but how you can figure it out, the process on your own. But a coach can really help you speed that process up and say, hey, I have a list of agents that are looking for your genre that I know, and you should reach out to them. They can really help you through that process. I think editing, as I mentioned earlier, developmental editing as early as you can, if you plot, of course, early, but that can help a lot. And then depending on if you traditionally publish or self-publish, you might want to wait for that final kind of copy editing, proofreading.
Cool. Well, before we started, before our podcast started, John mentioned that he was coming to Nashville here in the end of August to a conference called Killer Nashville. I think it's Killer Nashville.
Killer Nashville. Right?
Yeah, and it's a really big book event. It's everyone, it's very well known around the country. And John, you're doing something very interesting at this conference. You're reading the first 10 pages. You're doing critiques, correct?
That's right. People will pay a little extra and they'll send you the first, I think it's 5 or 10 pages. And I do basically a line by line edit. And then we sit down face to face at the conference and I give them the printout of their marked up pages. And we have a conversation. One person said, when I saw this, I wanted to throat punch you, but
well, so I find this fascinating because as someone who went through, trying to get our book published, when especially, agents will say, send me your first 10 pages. And you're like, well, how in the world are they going to understand my story? But your first 10 pages need to grab the reader. So I would like to ask both of you, what are you looking for in the first 10 pages?
I look for adherence to specific writing rules. I'm looking for, are you showing me the story? Are you telling it to me? Are you just explaining every detail, or are you kind of allowing the theater of the reader's mind, as my writing mentor used to say, take over? And where are you starting the story? Because that really matters. Where you start is crucial.
I was at a writers' conference in Baltimore last fall, and this was eye-opening, and it, in a sense, reinforced what Sarah just said and what I try to do. The setting was 3 agents were sitting in the front, and they were to assess the first page of anonymously submitted manuscripts that the head of the conference read, and they were to raise their hand at the point when they would be sending a rejection letter. This is the first page. And one of the things that happened is, there were a couple of times where they didn't raise their hand at all and they were intrigued, but there were 2 of the 3 raised their hands simultaneously several times. And the reason that they did is they said, I really liked the beginning. You intrigued me and this is an interesting character. And then you went back in time and you started to give me context. And, you took me out of the story and away from the forward momentum. Backstory is not bad, but you can also sprinkle it in as the story goes forward. And so, I think Sarah would agree. I hope you'll agree, but if you don't say so, that's a non-starter for a lot of agents, and they can tell after 4 paragraphs if they're not going to. They see 150 queries a day, at least, and they know what the gold standard is. And if you don't hook them and intrigue them, you don't give them everything. You make them want to turn the page. And if they're being given information they don't know is important yet, you're done. You're toast.
I was at a conference. I'm sorry.
No, that was just saying that was so interesting. Go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, I was at a writing conference just a few months ago, and I submitted a page to a contest like that. And it was really interesting for me to kind of see where they raised their hands as well. And oh my gosh, it was daunting as a writer.
Am
And
I quite, Sarah? Is that true that it really can be a rejection that quickly?
Oh yeah, within the first paragraph or two,
yeah,
it's you can tell that quickly. Which when I first started learning to write years ago, I was horrified. But now
Sure.
that I've been in it, it's true.
yeah.
Wow.
Sarah, on your website, you have a free giveaway for authors. Can you just tell the audience what they can find in that?
Yeah, so I just tried to create a little bit of a toolkit to help authors who are kind of starting out their writing journey and just walk them through the process. It's a quick walkthrough, but it's definitely just kind of hitting on the key aspects that you need to be thinking about and pursuing, and just some guidance to get you there. It can be daunting to stare at the blinking cursor on the blank page and think, where do I start? How do I find an agent? How do I write this thing? And so that was just my little contribution to say, let me encourage you along the way. Just download this and you can do this.
Yeah, that's so helpful
Very.
because when you sit down to write a book, and you don't know anything, which is why we started this podcast, because you learn everything the hard way.
As we did.
Yeah.
I could sit here and talk to you guys for another hour, but our time is running out, and I'm going to let Donna give you guys one last question. But again, thank you guys for your time. But Donna, one more question.
Okay, so I guess my last question is, what have you learned the hard way about what you do? And Sarah is an editor. John is both an editor and a writer. So you can speak to either, John.
What have I learned the hard way?
Yeah, that you can impart your wisdom on our audience.
I think one of the things I learned the hard way was when I first started editing at CNN, because for the first time you're starting to see other people's writing, and my temptation was to immediately dive in and do triage to make it like me, to make it in my voice. And I was crashing shows and pissing off writers, and so there's that fine line where you want to help the writer retain their voice and their creativity, but at the same time, you want to pay attention to the important stuff. And so that was a lesson I learned early.
Excellent. Thanks.
It's a great lesson. I think putting the reader first, which everybody says, but can be very difficult to do, both as a writer, because you want to tell the story that you want to tell, and as an editor, because you want to support the author and let them tell the story they want to tell. But realizing when you really do put that reader first, it's going to connect and resonate with the intended audience, and it's going to make much more of an impact than if we're just writing for writing's sake.
Thank you so much for that. So I know our audience are going to want to look you guys up. Sarah, where can people find you?
Yeah, sarahjrexford.com or any social media at sarahjrexford. And yeah, I'd love to chat with writers.
And John, what about you?
Best way to get in touch with me is through my website, which is johndedakis.com, DEDAKIS. It's one of those tricky Greek names. And there's a couple of pages on there where you can contact me.
Well, this has been a very enlightening conversation. Thank you so much. And Donna, why don't you tell everyone about our next episode?
Sure. Our next episode, we are going to interview a historical author by the name of James Arnett.
I can't wait for that one.
Yeah.
And everyone, you guys can find us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, and check us out on Instagram. Again, Sarah, John, thank you. It was a pleasure. And everyone, until next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Hope Gibbs.
And I'm Donna Norman Carbone. It's time for you to get to work.
We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks with another tip from your author friends.